Hi, my name is Debra. I'm a counselor and a writer and a singer, a Christian, a believer, an idealist, and a realist. My realist tries to keep me out of trouble. My idealist, well, it has more fun. Lives in a world of fairy tales where everybody has a happy ending. I deal with addiction every day, though. Addiction has no happy ending. I'm going to tell you why some people are prone to addiction and others are not. First of all, you got a midbrain. A midbrain is where your food drive, your sex drive, adrenaline's made, and 22 kinds of endorphins, happy chemicals that make you calm and happy. One thing a midbrain cannot do is it cannot think of consequences. Dopamine is the most important chemical because it's a learning reward chemical. It's what makes you want to repeat whatever you just did, because your brain, through the chemical glutamate, writes down how much dopamine everything makes. So when people try drugs or drink too much or gamble or adrenaline junkies or get some other kind of rush from their habits, their brain makes dopamine, and that's permanently recorded in your mind, and then triggers bring it back to the surface, and people relapse when they don't want to and when they least expect it. Because people, places, things, and feelings and emotions are all associated with these habits, and they're all written down in your subconscious, and then a trigger brings it back up there. So again, it's a disease. Why? Because you inherit a vulnerability to a lack of dopamine and a lack of serotonin. Serotonin is like the brakes on the fast-moving dopamine car. Serotonin is what makes you feel content and happy and satisfied. If your brain don't make enough serotonin, even on a good day, you don't feel satisfied. So on a bad day, just think how bad you feel. Same reason for mental health problems, why some people are more anxious and depressed and take longer to get over things, or mood swings, or other issues. Well, it's because there's an imbalance of brain chemicals. Lack of dopamine, the chemical that's only made when something's better than expected, and lack of serotonin. Think of the dopamine as that fast car, the addict's brain, that doesn't normally make a bunch of dopamine. But when it does, scientifically, it makes 4 times more than anyone else. So it's like a car that never starts, but when it does, it outruns everyone in town. And that's how it is within the chemistry of an addicted person's brain. Serotonin, lack of that, is the reason people never feel satisfied, and they become obsessive and compulsive at whatever they're doing. Again, midbrain cannot think of consequences. You don't inherit a Budweiser gene or a marijuana gene or a meth or cocaine or Lortab gene. What you inherit, though, is a vulnerability. Think of it this way. If you are vulnerable to diabetes because all your relatives have had it, if you don't take serious action with your health, you're inevitably most likely going to end up with it. You don't have to, but it's very easy to be because you're genetically wired to it. Let's say you're really hungry and you don't want to ask for help, and you don't have a job and you don't want to ask nobody, and you're walking through a store and you haven't ate for 7 days. Well, you're awful hungry. That cheese stick or that donut might be calling your name to eat me, and you know you ain't got no money to pay for it. But again, somebody that never stole in their life, they're vulnerable, they're hungry, they don't want to ask for help, so they grab that cheese stick, they grab that donut, and that sure is a waste of a jail cell to be put in there for a cheese stick and a donut, right? Well, anyhow, that's what you inherit when you have addiction problems, a vulnerability. Some people don't have it. If you don't come from a bunch of relatives that don't have drinking or drug problems or gambling or other excessive behaviors, even, coffee, cigarettes, too many lotto tickets, too much work, too much shopping, whatever you do tends to be obsessive and compulsive. Those are all vulnerabilities. You most likely have a good shot of possibly ending up with some of those problems. Same with mental health, if it's inherited. Again, no fault of your own, but it is what it is. Midbrain cannot think of consequences, and that part of your brain shouldn't be making your decisions. But when you're under the influence of a habit or an addiction, the dopamine rush feeling controls the midbrain, and then the midbrain takes over the frontal cortex. Now, the frontal cortex is where your morals, your values, your beliefs, your love of family, your love of God, and that's a part of your brain that should make your choices, the logical, think of consequences, rational brain center. But again, when you're under the influence of whatever is making your dopamine, your logical brain is kind of shoved in the closet, and it don't work very well, and sometimes it doesn't work at all, depending on how strong of unhealthy dopamine maker substance you're doing. Again, the best natural pleasures in the world pump up 300-400 milligrams of dopamine, which is plenty. But if you get used to meth or cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, gambling, whatever, they pump up much, much higher levels. Meth and heroin being the absolute worst. Crystal meth and heroin, 1,400 milligrams of dopamine. And that's why people don't want to eat, sleep. They don't care about nothing except getting the next rush, because that's like overcharging your circuits. It's like living in an RV and you plug too many appliances in at one time and the breaker blows. Well, that's what you're doing to your poor brain. But, people think they feel good in the meanwhile until their brain explodes and have an aneurysm or a heart attack, or you end up in jail or with CPS, or just plain ruin your whole life altogether. But you're enjoying the ride, most addicts think, until it comes to an end. And even sometimes the ride, before it comes to an end, starts causing all these problems. So, it's never a good thing. But again, when you're under the influence of the addiction rules the midbrain. Midbrain, even if it's sober, doesn't think of consequences. That's the food, the sex, the adrenaline, and the 22 kinds of endorphins that you need to make dopamine and serotonin.